So we're going to start today and we're going to talk a little bit about facial features and well, let's start with the eye. So you need to realize that I'm going to do this out of sheer memory. And we're going to have some support files for you. So I recommend, looking at the photograph that we have of an eye or, using a friend or getting a model. We'll take a look later on in this, series at working from a model. But right now I'm just going to do this out of my memory. And I'm going to talk about sort of the way an eye works or the way to think about it, okay? So I think the first thing to think about, again, if you sort of think back to our ellipse, is there's a certain shape to an eye that we need to talk about. A beginning student might sort of go for this kind of, football-esque shape. And we need to sort of really watch that. There's a more careful study of the eye. And I'm going to exaggerate this shape. So I want you to realize I'm exaggerating it for emphasis. So think of it as you've got a short and a long. Okay, there's usually a little bit of a break here. Again, I'm exaggerating this just so I get the point across. And then on the underside, there's sort of a short, and then there's a long. So I want you to kind of think of an eye that way. That may be a bit, abstract, but again, we have this long element through here, this long element through here, and we have a shorter one here and a shorter one here. So I want you to kind of think about that. There's sort of a, a diagonal as it goes through, all right? So I'll start with that short. I'm going to come down with a longer element. And I'll put in a little bit of a tear duct. And you notice I just sort of put in kind of a square-esque sort of shape. Again, I'm trying to create this short version and then this kind of a longer version over here. Again, I'm exaggerating this a little bit. Just so you get that point across. All right. Now, we have an upper eyelid. Now, it's important to always remember, okay, that the eyeball, right, take that word ball, let that live in your head. It is round, it is spherical, don't forget it's an eyeball. Therefore, it has a fair amount of form, of light and shadow. So there's a ball that's actually quite large that kind of lives, in a socket. That eye socket is, the hole in the skull where that eye lives. There's your eyeball within. There's your nasal cavity, and you have this, these two large holes within a skull, and that's where that eyeball lives. So there's an eyelid that comes and sort of wraps around and sinks down into that socket. Now I'm going to give myself a light source, and I'll say that light source is coming from this direction. The eye we can break it up into thirds. So kind of think of it as a third, and a third. Let's push that in a little bit. And that's sort of where that pupil lives. Now, in most people, typically, a pupil goes, up under, or the eyelid comes up over that pupil. And typically as well on the bottom, it gets cut off. So notice that it's cut off here, right? I don't see the full circle. And we cut a little bit off of there. And we can start putting that pupil within the eye. Now, this lid, right, will throw a shadow. This is very important. All right, it'll throw a shadow across that. Okay. Not only will it throw a shadow across that, it throws a shadow across that ball or the white of the eye. And that's something that a lot of people that are beginning with an eye sort of forget. Okay. I'll come in, I'll soften that shadow up. Now, remember we talked about, this is a third. Well, this is interesting. We can also break this space up into thirds. And we can start putting in that pupil. So again, a third and a third, right? Okay, so we let that go. Now, of course, the diameter or the width of the pupil will change depending on the light, right? A pupil will grow in diameter and shift in size. But if we're just sort of talking about basic eye, we can kind of think of it as a third. We got to keep thinking about this concept of light and shadow. So again, we have a sphere in here. That sphere will be darker on this side. So even though it's a white of an eye, typically if the light source is on that side, you'll find a nice shadow through here. It's a nice dark rim. Exaggerate that. Okay. Now there's another sort of an under part of that eyeball that will come around. Our light source is here, so that's got shadow on it. It's got a little bit of shade typically. And again, I'm consistently going back and thinking there's a sphere within a socket. And we literally have this overlapping of, you could say of, flesh that wraps around the eye. So I'm just going to shade this in. Some of these things will get lost and we can bring them back out and bring our detail back. I'm going to think of that concept of a ball, add a little bit of shade through here, and I'll just reestablish. Anything that gets messed up, I'll just slowly reestablish. Okay. And there's typically a little bit of a rim, and I'll start to pull it out. A light will catch, and there's a rim. Take a look at our example that we put in. Take a look in the mirror in the morning when you're getting ready, and study your eye. Now you'll typically find a light will start to pull out that white of that eye. Now this is important. You notice I toned that. You have to have a certain amount of tone down on the paper in order to give yourself a highlight. If you don't have that tone, then you can't have a highlight. So that's that tone that helps you establish these nice highlights. And an eye has several highlights that we'll talk about. So one will be over here. That light source is coming down. It will catch a little bit of that light. Typically your tear duct has a little bit of gloss in it or a little bit of a sheen that will catch a little bit of a highlight. that rim. Look for that. So usually a little bit of texture through here. So you can describe that with the way that you're handling your tools. Now I'm starting to get a little bit more comfortable with where this is at, so I can start to darken things up, tighten things up a little bit. Now there's typically a nice dark rim, and it's a fuzzy line, right? You see I've got it sort of a jagged, you know, think of it, they're always coming in, these little lines. I'll make some little arrows to help exaggerate that so you understand. It's nice dark. Again, I'm working on this shadow. And that typically just, you know, fades into the interior. I'm thinking of my light source, so I know that this side is going to be darker. I just sort of keep pushing into the interior. You'll find that there's these little... Now I'm lightening up because I know that this is the side that my light source is in. Now make this subtle, make it soft, all right? Make it fuzzy. The same thing is going to happen in this eye as I work on it. Is we're going to have to lay down a certain amount of tone or a certain amount of value to establish what will, you know, our light source. I'm going to make this pupil pretty dark. You know, I mean, we got to remember that's a hole that's in the eye. Soften that up. And now that I have a decent amount of value down, I feel a little more comfortable coming in, making things a little bit darker. So I'm going to keep pushing my darks dark. I think it's important with an eye that you get the pupil quite dark. There's quite a range of value within an eye. It's a full range of value within the eye from light to dark. So I'm going to continue to work on that concept. Coming back down to that lid, I'm just sort of, you know, tightening things up. Now, it's important that right about here is where this part of the eye comes over and the under part shoots under. So it's very important that this overlaps that. Okay. Again, I'm going to keep building up this sense of light and shadow. See me come back in, and I'll make this a little fuzzier. Always pushing into the interior. Soften this shadow up. If you want to use a stump or a tool, or even a paintbrush will work nicely. And I just keep playing this game of, let's darken our darks, let's see where we can lighten our lights, where can we pull out some highlights. Come back to this tear duct. I'll start to establish that a little bit more. I don't want to get too far. There's also going to be shadow right along here. A little bit of shadow in here. So we're trying to make this eye live in space, right? We're trying to understand that it's not flat. It's three-dimensional. Again, I'm constantly thinking, where's my light source? And I'm constantly thinking of the fact that this is an eyeball. It is round. It is round. Pull out some highlight. I'll keep working. Come back in, I'll establish that lid a little bit more. And I'm constantly thinking with the lid too, is that it sort of wraps and kind of pushes back in. It's pushing in, and I'll actually draw a little diagram over here. Here's your eyelid, right? That pushes in. Here's your eyeball. The pupil is actually a secondary sphere on the eyeball, and then you have your lower lid. So this wraps around, this kind of comes up. So you need to think about your eyeball in those terms. It's very spherical in nature. Okay, a lot of people make their eyes flat. You got to push that concept. I'm going to start sort of thinking about the eyelash. The eyelash, pulls up and away. There's typically a little bit of a bottom lash as well. And you got to think those really curl almost a little bit more of a side of an eye. Those curl down and up, down and up, down and up. So I'll start to add a little bit of lash through here as I'm building up this eye. Now take your time. Again, this takes practice. Don't get frustrated. And just keep practicing this concept. I'm building things up. I'm going to keep coming back. What needs to be darker? What needs to be lighter? With an eye, there's lots of lost edges, we could say. You know, things are quite fuzzy in areas, and let it be fuzzy. You know, not everything needs to be defined. And keep pushing this idea of shadow. This needs to get a little bit darker. Don't be afraid to get a darker value in the white of the eye. What you see is the white of the eye. You can come in with a stump. The paintbrush would work great. Fingers fine. Again, I'm always thinking of going to the center of that pupil. And some of this I want to be, fuzzy, lost edges, less detail. So I'm going to come in with the finger or a stump and kind of blend that in. Build back a little more eyelash. Again, they're coming down and wrapping up, coming down over the eye, wrapping up. Wrapping up, 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 up. Now this is where it starts to get, and you've got to hold back on this concept. It starts to get a little bit fun, where we start getting to a point when we can think about putting in what we can call a highlight, what some people call the highlight or catch light or specular highlight. I like to think of it as a specular highlight in the eye. Again, I'm going to come back and keep, I know I sound like a broken record. I'm going to keep pushing this, light, dark, right? Look for that. There's going to be a little catch light in that tear duct. Right about there. It's probably going to be maybe 2, okay? This is an organic object. It's not mechanical. It's not man-made. So there'll be a disbursement or scattering, we could say, of this light as it moves across this organic form. And again, there's typically a little bit of light and a little bit of texture, and most people have a, so you see me handling my eraser, kneaded eraser, my tool in a manner, you see me dotting that, it helps me sort of get a little bit of that texture through here. All right. Again, I'm going to come back to this shadow, constantly thinking, where is my light source? How can I make this appear more round, more lifelike? think a lot of students are a little bit hesitant to put this amount of dark or dark area or shadow in an eye, but there's a fair amount. And then we can start thinking about pulling out. There'll be a nice, typically a highlight. So that wouldn't look as light unless we had some tone behind it. I mean, someone could argue maybe that's a little bit too much tone. We can just tap that, and we can pull that out with a finger or a chamois. So again, there's this game I'm playing of light to dark. But there'll be a nice catch light, typically, right here. And I'll start to pull out. There'll also be typically a nice catch light right there. And it's typically nice to have that sort of cross over the pupil. And there'll be a little bit of catch light pulling out right on the other side. Now, don't make this as light as that, okay? Remember, it's on this side meaning the shadow side of the sphere, eyeball, the ball. So I can pull that out a little bit. Sometimes you might find that there's a touch of catch light right over here. And again, I'm going to keep working. Now that I've got my lighter light in here, I can just keep working between light and dark. I'm going to erase this out a little bit more. All right. Soften this up. Pull a little bit more out of here. I want that a little bit lighter. But again, these highlights wouldn't be as dramatic had I not gone in and put that tone over here. A bit of light will be pull up through here. There might be an eyelash or two that might catch a little bit of light. As we come in, we might catch a little bit of light through here, and I'm going to soften that up. Come back in. I'll soften that up. I don't want this to detract from that. I want this to be my main highlight. And I'll even come in with some white chalk in a minute and emphasize that. Trying to make things soft. This bottom lid needs to be reestablished just a little bit. There we go. It doesn't take much. Come back in and try to reestablish this pupil, make it a little more rounder. Again, come back to the darkest area. Again, this is a hole in the actual anatomy of the eye. So make it dark, make it dark. Make that rim around the entire eye, make that quite dark. Now as I work on this, you see this, that sort of technique we may have talked about earlier. I'm almost making little circles because I want it to be a soft edge. Make the exterior a little bit of a harder edge, and as we get into the interior, it's a much softer edge. We'll typically find a little bit of lash down here. A different kind of eyelash. Take note of it, study it, take a look at it. Much different kind of eyelash than on top of the eye. So again, this light source is coming down, so there'll be a little bit of light typically catching on this back side or this rim. I'll let it fade out. There'll be a little bit of light, possibly right here. And it's just a great thing to do, study that eye, learn that eye, and get to a point where you can draw it out of memory like this. Again, it takes time. It takes practice. It takes a little bit of fortitude. And it takes not getting frustrated, all right? You've got to slow down and take your time and understand that it takes practice. Again, I'm going to keep pushing this highlight, and I'll even come in when I feel like I've got things looking pretty good or okay. And this is meant to be a basic demonstration. So I'm going to come in with a white piece of charcoal. I'm really going to emphasize this idea of a catch light in the eye. A little bit here in the tear duct. Maybe a little bit through here, possibly a touch here. I'll hit that just a little bit. And I want my main highlight to be dominant right here. I want it to be the strongest part right in here. So this is something I could continue to work on. You can make this as detailed as you'd like or not. But this gives you a general understanding or concept of how I think about or how I work on a human eye. And I can't stress enough, and you've heard it throughout this video, but I'll go back to it. This idea of a sphere, the idea of a ball living in space with a light source on it. That's what we need to concentrate on. We need to concentrate on what's soft or lost, okay, versus what's, sharper and more in detail. We need to constantly consider what's light, what's dark, and within an eye, there's typically a full range of value. Those darks are going to be dark, and our lights are going to be quite light. So I want to take a moment and work just a little bit more on this and keep pushing some of those concepts. You see that I'm working on the rim. It needs a little bit more work as it comes around. Again, our light source is coming here. You will find a catch light right here, coming down to the eye, and we'll have a little bit more highlight pushing right through here. So again, find an angle. Your light source is over here. Look for that consistency. Highlight, highlight, highlight. So this can be pulled out just a little bit. As it goes under the sphere, I'm going to add more shading to this lid. And there's typically, we get down, we'll find a crease, and we will pick up a little bit of the crease. So to add that texture, all I need to do is to start coming in and actually putting little segments of texture. Just little nuances. Let's push the concept of light through here a little bit more. And we know as we come around, we have to get lighter and lighter. Coming into the light. Concept of our V, our underlid pulling off. It's not uncommon to have another little crease right here, but not always. So I'll start to add that. when you work on a crease, try to find an area to let it not connect as much, have a little bit of a broken line. That will help with the organic quality of the human form subject. And we find that around this tear duct, right, there's typically a little bit of a bump here. It may pick up just a touch of light as well. Now it's not wet, so we can't make a highlight as nice as we've done in the eye itself and the tear duct. This is skin. It has a certain amount of translucency to it, a lot of interest, a lot of texture. The eyeball's sort of a different material with all that water, that wetness of it. And this lid, as it wraps around, the upper part will sort of start pushing against it as this skin kind of starts to move from, this area is above, right? And then this area wraps around, and then this part at the end of the eye, this part actually starts to push over. And we'll just melt some of this into the previous demo here. And our eyebrow will live way up there. I won't get into drawing that, but I will add a little bit more of the idea of this lid pushing around and kind of getting pushed as it pushed up and over. Add a little bit more tone in here. If I were working on nicer paper, I would probably move from working with my finger to working with a stump, getting the oil off my hand. But as we discussed before, that's what's the great things about cheaper paper, newsprint. And after a while, you build up that coat where you don't have to worry about that oil on your hand. I'm going to go through and unify. Then I'm going to stop and I'm going to say, well, where can I reestablish a little more highlight and control it? It's going to be right here, and I'm going to do it in a manner that has just a little bit of texture on it because we're working on the skin. So I'm going to tap this. I'm going to turn it into a little shape and kind of more tap it. Move it throughout here. Okay. Because it comes down, again, I'll sort of tap an area, move, so that I don't have one straight line. I think this wraps us up with a good solid concept of lighting with an eye. Practice makes perfect. We got to continue to practice and push these little concepts. If you do that, it won't be very long before you can do something that's just like this. Hi, I'm Jonathan Simon, and in this course, I'm going to be teaching you how to draw. Do you want to learn how to draw beautiful drawings that amaze your friends, family, or colleagues? Would you like to learn how to effectively convey ideas in visual form? Would you like to produce amazing art, either from your imagination or from a subject, all while having fun? Then this is your course, The Complete Guide to Drawing. Drawing is a foundational,
in-demand skill. In fact, drawing can help you in any career in which visual storytelling is used. This course begins with the basics, where we practice the art of gesture drawing to capture the essence of the subject, from object to animal to landscape. Once you've learned the basics of gesture drawing, you will then apply effective drawing techniques while learning line and contour drawing. Next, you will learn the helpful practice of structural drawing. You will then build upon those skills as you learn various ways to apply tone or value in a drawing in order to add realistic depth and form to your drawings. As you learn how to draw in perspective, you will also apply other various methods in order to show depth. Finally, I will teach you how to produce a detailed rendered drawing of a still life by using the block-in method. Then for the final project in this masterclass, you'll draw a portrait of a subject while you apply the various considerations and techniques you learn throughout this course. I will guide you along the way as you build your understanding of light, shadow, form, value, and perspective, as you build your drawing techniques and produce amazing drawings. This course has over 19 hours of helpful video content as well as helpful handouts and support files. I'm Jonathan, a professional artist and educator. I've been teaching students how to draw for many years now. As a university professor of drawing and painting, I've had a lifetime career in art, from graphic design to illustration to digital illustration. Before becoming a full-time artist, commercially my work and illustrations have been published on various magazine covers, advertisements, and commissioned for various companies. Some of my art has been featured in prominent galleries throughout the United States. In this course, my professional experience and education will provide you with expert guidance as you improve your drawing skills. My goal is to equip you with the skills and knowledge you need to produce amazing drawings. Jump on in the course and start drawing today. Get feedback from me and your peers as you build your skills and your portfolio. I offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you're not satisfied, you can get a refund. But I know you'll love this course as you start to produce beautiful drawings. So don't wait. Join today, and I'll see you in this course.